Hi, this is Kevin at the Virtual Planetarium at Raritan Valley Community College. Welcome to our weekly Star Talk. Today we're going to be talking about our sun, specifically sunspots. But before we do that, let's talk about our upcoming moon phases. We have a first quarter moon on April 9th, we have a full moon coming up on April 16th, and then we have a last quarter moon on April 23rd. Now, like I said, today we're going to be talking about our sun. Before we get started, just a little disclaimer, you should never look directly at the sun. Looking at the sun will definitely permanently burn your eyes and blind you, or at least cause you to lose some vision, and we don't want that. So just as a reminder, you should never look up at the sun unless you're doing it safely, and that means with special eclipse glasses, not just normal sunglasses. Alright, but why are we talking about the sun? Well, because last week, some nice big sunspots appeared on the sun, and we can see them right here. Sunspots are cooler spots on the sun. They look darker than the rest of the sun, like this one right here that we see. And that's because they're just that. They're not as hot as the rest of the sun. Now, since you should never look directly at the sun, we're using this website right here. It's called SDO. It stands for the Solar Dynamic Observatory, which is a NASA space telescope that is actually constantly monitoring the sun. And it looks at the sun in a lot of different wavelengths or colors, which is really cool. Here we have a Dopplergram, which measures how each part of the sun is moving either closer or further away from us. We have different wavelengths down here. All these wavelengths are not invisible light, so we're seeing different parts, different layers of the sun by looking at these different colors. The one we care about the most, however, is what we can see in visible light, at least for our purposes. And that is this one right here, the HMI intensitygram. So the intensity is how bright the sun is. And that's where we can see where the sun is normally bright, and then we have these cool little sunspots over here. So let's see if I can open this in a new tab, and then we can zoom in a little more to our sun. And there we can see the sunspots right there in the middle. Now, why do we care about sunspots? Well, sunspots mean increased solar activity, and they are caused when the sun's magnetic field goes crazy and creates those localized cooler areas. Now, this crazy magnetic field can also cause the sun to flare up and shoot stuff out into space. To see that, we're actually going to look at a different wavelength right here, and we see how it's like glowing off to the sides over here. This is stuff that we can't see in visible light. Hold on. There we go, that's a pretty good one. We can see, let's open this in a new tab, and we can see how it like flares up to the side here. So the stuff on the surface of the sun, on the atmosphere of the sun, actually gets flung out by this crazy magnetic field. You probably heard that last Thursday there was a chance of seeing auroras pretty far south, or seeing the northern lights pretty far south, even as far south as New Jersey. And that's because those flares actually hit the Earth. That material from the sun, called the coronal mass ejection, actually comes off the sun and hurls out into outer space and can actually hit the Earth. The auroras, or northern lights, happen when our magnetic field on the Earth protects us from that solar radiation, protects us from those charged particles from the sun. When those particles from the sun go shooting through outer space, they hit the Earth. Instead of hitting our Earth directly and ruining our atmosphere, they actually hit our magnetic field and travel through those field lines, the ones that don't get deflected, travel through the field lines, along the field lines, and enter our atmosphere near the poles. So we don't get all the charged particles, we just get some of them. And the ones that do get through and hit our atmosphere through our magnetic field lines charge up the particles in the atmosphere, and those creates these beautiful, beautiful lights. Well, usually the amount of charged particles that get through aren't that much, and so we can only see the northern lights from very, very northern latitudes. But every once in a while, we see a big burst that hits us, and the charged particles actually extend pretty far south, and we can see these northern lights at those further south latitudes. Last Thursday was when one of those pretty big ones hit. If you were in a dark location and clear skies, you probably could have seen some lights as far south as New York, which is very far south for these things. Sadly, light pollution really limits where you can see these lights, because if they do reach far enough south, they're not going to be nearly as bright as they are towards the poles. So you need very dark skies, you need obviously clear skies because you won't be able to see through the clouds to see these lights, but more importantly, yeah, you need to be far enough away from these light polluted areas like cities, New York City right next to us. So because of that reason, there was no chance we were going to see these lights last Thursday, even if it was clear. So a lot of you might have seen in the news that there was a chance we were going to see them, but to see that, we really need to move very far away from the lights because the ones that do reach us aren't nearly as bright as these beautiful ones that we see in the pictures. All right, but have they ever been visible from New Jersey? They have. Again, you can only see them from like the really dark parts of the states, but these storms do sometimes make the lights bright enough to reach down as far south as New Jersey. The last time they were visible was in 2005, and before that it was actually in 2003, which was the brightest one on record. So this storm that caused in 2003, here we actually have some pictures of how the northern lights looked from here in New Jersey. This storm in 2003 was among the biggest ones in the space era. So ever since we started sending stuff into outer space like satellites to be able to measure the sun and be able to really see what's going on with this stuff. Now, was it the only big storm? Definitely not. And definitely not even the biggest. In 1859, there was a really big storm called the Carrington Event, which was so strong that telegraph machines started shocking operators. Some of them made papers catch on fire because there were like electric arcs coming from the machine, and those hit papers and those caught on fire. And some machines could even work without batteries because the geomagnetic storm, that all that energy that was coming from the sun was actually creating currents inside of the cables, so you didn't need a battery to work these machines. You could actually just use them with the static in the air, basically, which is wild. There was another really big one in 1921, which burnt out fuses, caused fires, and even caused like a communications blackout for several hours. Like the telegraph machines were out, radio was out, and it was, sounds like it would have been a mess. If one of these big solar emissions that caused those storms back in the day were to hit us now, it would really cause some serious damage because most everything we have relies on electricity. All the satellites that we have orbiting around the Earth, those would probably be fried. All the electronics, all the communication equipments we have, first of all, rely on the satellites, but they're also electric. So those would probably be overcharged and it would be a mess. The northern lights would be incredible and there would be a blackout, so we'd be able to see them from most everywhere, but it wouldn't really be great money-wise. I think somebody estimated that if something like that would hit us now, it would cause something in the trillions of dollar range of damage. So that's pretty bad. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you learned something new. Again, use that website to check out the sun. It's called Solar Dynamics Observatory, or SDO. I'm going to put the link for it in the description of this video so you can check that out as well. And it's a very fun, safe way to look at the sun. And if you have those solar eclipse glasses, it's a good way to monitor the sun to see if there are any sunspots that you might be able to see with your special glasses. If you like this video, be sure to give us a like, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope you had a great week.